Dances with Wolves. I'm reviewing this movie because this week we get a new Kevin Costner movie. That's a big deal. It's two parts. It's directed by him. It's a passion project of his. American Saga Chapter 1. While the reviews haven't been great, I'm excited about that movie and I want to talk about it with you guys. But I kind of also want to do a thing with new movies where I mentioned this before on my channel. I want to talk about more older film. But the main hard part about doing that is the YouTube algorithm says no, newer film, newer shows is the only type of stuff that matters, right? And so a lot of times I'm reviewing a lot of franchises and movie series, and that's fun. But I also want to do older movies that are just, interesting to talk about. And Dances with Wolves is definitely one of those films, but I still have to tie it into a newer movie. So one of the ways I've thought about talking about older films is when a director of a certain stature has a new film coming out. I go and review one of their movies that they've either starred in or have directed. And in this case, I'm doing Dances with Wolves. I think for Chapter 2, I'll probably do Waterworld or Field of Dreams. I haven't decided which one of those. I'm probably going to do one of those for Chapter 2, talking about a different Kevin Costner movie. But I decided to do it Dances with Wolves because Dances with Wolves, I think, is the most important of his filmography for him. I mean, this movie, he directed and starred in himself. This is a passion project of his. It's won Best Picture. It was a big deal. And it's kind of late in recent years gotten some hate and a lot of negativity and a lot of disgust for some reasons that I can kind of understand, but also reasons I don't. I also think for the newer generation, it's not really talked about, where I still feel like, I feel like there are new people discovering films like Waterworld and Field of Dreams and some other Kevin Costner films where this movie's more forgotten about. And some of that is for obvious reasons, and we'll get into that. But this is a great movie, and I think it deserves more discussion. Now I'm going to get into the obvious up front. The biggest thing about this movie, of why this movie gets so much negativity, is it is seen as a white savior movie. And I do think that in some ways this term is overused, but also is not overused. I mean, it is a big problem with Hollywood. It still is a big problem with Hollywood. But I remember when the Great Wall movie came out, that movie, had like Matt Damon in the main lead, and people were calling it a white savior movie, and there's all this controversy and nonsense, and then it just kind of like, whatever. I don't think all these movies deserve the negativity. I think I'm gonna approach this in two ways. I'm not gonna get into that concept too much. I'm still gonna address it because it's important to address when you're talking about this movie. But also, I don't think I'm the best person to address that. I'm not Native American. I don't, maybe there's like 5% of me is, and like I have some ancestor I don't know about, right? But like for the most part, I'm not Native American, right? So I can't relate to how some people might feel about their history and things like that being represented on screen in a very not great way that they might find pandering or patronizing or just racist, but I'm just gonna state, for me, it didn't bother me because the way this movie approaches it did feel more balanced than most of those films usually do. This isn't a Pocahontas. This isn't some of the various other examples I can't think of this happening where it was truly disgusting. But, I think this movie is a very good movie despite that very crucial flaw that is not easy to ignore, but I think is still not gonna harm this movie as much as some people would like to make it out to be. I understand if you don't like this movie because of that. I get it. The other thing that I think people get bothered by with this movie is the length. And I will state, for this review, I did watch the theatrical cut. Now, usually when I watch this movie, I indulge myself and watch the extended cut, and that's just because I like the scenery, the cinematography, and the tone, and the feel of this movie, and so I usually go for the longer version because that has more of that. I would say if you're watching this for the first time, I'd recommend the theatrical cut is much easier to digest. It's still 3 hours, but the extended cut is 4 hours. So I get it if you're not in for all that. The reason I watched the theatrical cut for this review is just because I've had a very long work week. I'm already late to recording this review and getting this review out to you guys. So I don't want to like delay the process further by not having my review out for this review. So I just decided to go with the alternative, shorter version just to get that disclosure out of the way. But yeah, this movie is a gorgeous movie. The cinematography is excellent throughout all of this movie. There's so many just beautiful shots of just landscape and scenery and just stuff. Even the moments where you're having to look at, battles and people being murdered and, terrible things happening. Even that stuff has some kind of like beauty to it in some ways, even though it's clearly terrible. And there's stuff with that constantly throughout the movie, and it's truly wonderful how well this film is truly directed and how good the cinematography. The score to this movie is just some of the best movie scores of all time right here. It's just such incredible sounds and just really engaging during those moments of lush scenery and atmosphere. It's larger than life, and that's really kind of the tone and vibe of this movie. It feels like a legend that is larger than life, and so maybe a movie like this not having the best protagonist might hurt it, but because the film almost feels larger than life and is really just engaging you in the scenery and in this culture and just letting things sit and just let you take in stuff in some ways, that's normally negative, but for here it's really not. All the performances are excellent for what they're given, which isn't a lot, but again, that's not the point of this movie. It is just a really well done movie from top to bottom. What an excellent fucking piece here. I just absolutely adore a lot of what this film was going for, a lot of what it was trying to do. I think it has a lot of interesting ideas here. It just is such an engaging piece from beginning to end for me. I think this is a movie that if you've never seen it and you've only heard the negative talk about it, don't do that. And, find it on a streaming service because, yeah, this film's very long. Maybe watch like an hour or so at a time if you need to get through it. Because I will admit, there are points where it can feel a bit of a slog. But I don't feel like that's a negative. I think that's just the nature of films being long, that sometimes they can just feel that way. But I think really this film is truly a masterpiece in its own right. Maybe some people argued this film did not deserve Best Picture over Goodfellas. I kind of agree, but I understand why this film won. Because it's truly a movie that when you watch it, it takes everything out of you. And I think Goodfellas doesn't necessarily do that. And also this movie clearly has a lot of tropes that the Academy likes, and that's clear why this movie won when the year it came out. So, I don't know. Truly wonderful movie, and I recommend it if you can find this steelbook, get it. It is a gorgeous steelbook. Mine, unfortunately, has some scratches in it, but the Blu-ray disc is in my player. But you got a Blu-ray disc with the extended cut, special features. Why is there no 4K of Dances with Wolves, by the way? Next year's the anniversary, so maybe next year. But yeah, very limited steelbook, so it might be gone. It might be pricey, but I love this film, and I highly, highly recommend more people check it out.